Before your view of history changes forever, discover the hidden truth about the origin of Europeans according to the Bible. This video will reveal essential facts you need to know now to understand how Europe really formed. In the beginning, before time and space as we know it, there was only an absolute void. Suddenly, God spoke, and with his powerful word, the universe began to take shape. In 6 days of creation, every detail was meticulously planned and executed, demonstrating the greatness and power of the Creator. On the first day, God said, "Let there be light," and thus the darkness was torn apart by a bright light. This separation between light and dark gave rise to day and night. On the second day, God created the firmament, separating the waters, establishing the sky above and the earth below. The third day brought dry land, seas, and the vegetation that would cover the earth, each plant and tree sprouting according to its kind. On the fourth day, the universe lit up with the creation of the sun, moon, and stars, establishing the cycles of day, night, seasons, and years. On the fifth day, the waters and skies filled with life. Fish and marine creatures swam in the oceans, and birds of all colors and sizes flew through the skies. Then, on the sixth day, God created the land animals, each according to its kind. And finally, in a moment of pure perfection, he created human beings. He formed Adam from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, making him a living soul. Eve was created from one of Adam's ribs to be his companion. Together, they were placed in the Garden of Eden, a paradise of beauty and abundance, where every need was met. Adam and Eve were more than just the first people. They were the image of God on earth, endowed with intelligence, will, and the ability to love. They were given the responsibility to take care of the garden, to name the animals, and to be fruitful and multiply, filling the earth. This harmonious beginning was not just a creation story, but the introduction of a relationship between God and humanity, a bond of love and care. With each act of creation, God's goodness and wisdom were manifested, setting the stage for the story of humanity. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve lived in perfect harmony with creation and with God. They had everything they needed and were surrounded by indescribable beauty. In the center of the garden, however, there were two special trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God gave Adam and Eve a clear command. They could eat from all the trees except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because on the day they ate from it, they would surely die. One day, while Eve was walking through the garden, a cunning serpent, more crafty than all the other animals, approached her. The serpent questioned God's words, planting doubt in Eve's heart. "Is it true that God said not to eat from any tree in the garden?" asked the serpent. Eve corrected the serpent, saying they could eat from all the trees except that specific one, because otherwise they would die. The serpent with cunning replied, "You will not surely die. God knows that on the day you eat from this tree, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Tempted by the idea of gaining wisdom and seduced by the fruit that looked delicious, Eve took and ate it. Adam, who was with her, also ate the forbidden fruit. Immediately their eyes were opened, and they realized they were naked. Filled with shame, they tried to cover themselves with fig leaves. When they heard God's voice in the garden, they hid among the trees. God, knowing what had happened, called out to Adam, "Where are you?" Adam replied, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Adam, in a defensive act, blamed Eve. "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Eve, in turn, blamed the serpent. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Because of this disobedience, God pronounced curses on the serpent, Eve, and Adam. The serpent was condemned to crawl on its belly, and enmity was established between it and Eve's descendants. Eve would experience intense pain in childbirth and would be subject to her husband. Adam, for his disobedience, would face a cursed ground, working hard to produce food until he returned to the dust from which he was created. In an act of mercy, God made clothes from animal skins for Adam and Eve, covering their shame. However, due to their sin, they were expelled from the Garden of Eden to prevent them from also eating from the tree of life and living forever in their fallen state. An angel with a flaming sword was placed at the entrance of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life. Expelled from the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve started a new life in a different world, now marked by pain and hard work. Despite the fall, the promise to multiply and fill the earth still remained. Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel. Early on, the brothers showed different paths in their lives. Cain became a farmer, while Abel became a shepherd. Over time, both decided to offer sacrifices to God. Cain brought fruits from the ground, this while Abel offered the firstborn of his flock, the best part of his sheep. God was pleased with Abel's offering, but did not show the same favor to Cain's offering. This contrast ignited anger and jealousy in Cain's heart. God, noticing Cain's state of mind, warned him, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." However, God's warning was not enough to curb Cain's envy. In a field, in a moment of uncontrolled anger, Cain attacked and killed his brother Abel. It was the first murder in human history, an act that broke brotherhood and brought a new level of tragedy to the world. God then asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain, trying to hide his deed, replied, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" But God, knowing the truth, said, "What have you done? Listen. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain, overwhelmed with despair, cried out that his punishment was unbearable and he feared being killed by anyone who found him. In response, God put a mark on Cain to ensure that no one would kill him, giving him a form of protection even in his condemnation. From then on, Cain moved away from the presence of the Lord and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. There, he built a city and started a lineage marked by the creation of culture and technology, but also by violence and distance from God. Adam and Eve, still mourning the loss of Abel, had another son, whom they named Seth, seeing in him the continuation of God's promise. Seth also had a son, Enosh, and it was during this time that people began to call on the name of the Lord again, seeking a reconnection with the Creator. The story of humanity continued, with Seth's line growing and developing. Generations passed, and the earth began to fill with people. The descendants of Seth were known for calling on the name of the Lord, seeking to live righteously. Among them was a man named Noah. Noah lived in a time when wickedness had spread across the earth. Violence and corruption were everywhere, and the human heart was constantly inclined toward evil. God observed this growing depravity and regretted creating man, deciding to purify the earth. However, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. He was a righteous man, blameless among his peers, and walked with God. God told Noah his plan to destroy all life on earth through a flood, a cataclysmic event that would bring a new era of purity. But in his mercy, God instructed Noah to build an ark, a large boat that would save him, his family, and a pair of each animal species. According to God's specifications, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, began building the ark. The task was monumental, but Noah, faithful to God, worked tirelessly. People around mocked and ignored Noah's warnings about the impending divine judgment, living their lives as if nothing were going to happen. Finally, the ark was completed, and God commanded Noah to gather the animals. From each species, a male and a female entered the ark, accompanied by Noah, his wife, his sons, and his daughters-in-law. When everyone was safely inside the ark, God closed the door. Then the sky opened up, and the rain began to fall. For 40 days and 40 nights, the waters covered the earth. All creatures outside the ark perished, and the landscape of the earth was transformed. Noah and his family, however, were protected, floating above the floodwaters. After the 40 days of rain, the waters began to recede, but it took months for the land to start drying. Finally, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah sent out a series of birds to see if the waters had fully receded. First, a raven, which didn't find a place to land. Then, a dove, which returned with an olive branch, signaling that the waters were going down. When the land was completely dry, God ordered Noah and his family to leave the ark. They released the animals, which spread across the land, restarting the cycle of life. In gratitude, Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices to God. In response, God promised never to destroy the earth with a flood again and placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign of this covenant. Noah and his family began a new life, and the earth was repopulated from them. God blessed Noah and his sons, telling them to be fruitful and multiply, filling the earth again. This new covenant marked a new beginning, a second chance for humanity, founded on righteousness, faith, and the hope for a better future. The earth began to repopulate from Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Each of them followed different paths, giving rise to variations in cultures. The connection to the European peoples specifically begins through Japheth. Japheth had several sons, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. These names, though ancient, carry the seeds of the future peoples who would inhabit Europe and other nearby regions. Among them, the lineages of Gomer and Javan stand out significantly in the history of European origins. Gomer was the father of three sons, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The descendants of Gomer are often associated with the ancient peoples who inhabited northern and western Europe. Ashkenaz, for example, is traditionally linked to the Scythians, a group of nomadic tribes that spread across the region that now includes Eastern Europe and Central Asia. These peoples played a crucial role in forming early European societies, influencing culture, language, and traditions. Riphath and Togarmah, in turn, are often associated with tribes that moved westward, settling in areas that include parts of Central and Western Europe. The migratory movements of these groups were fundamental in spreading new technologies, agricultural practices, and cultural elements that shaped ancient Europe. Javan, another son of Japheth, had four sons, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Javan is recognized as the ancestor of the Greek peoples, and his descendants settled in the Mediterranean regions. Greece, with its rich history of philosophy, science, and art, emerges as one of the most influential civilizations in the Western world. Greek culture, with its mythology and achievements, left a profound legacy that continues to be felt today. Tarshish is often associated with the region of the Iberian Peninsula, contributing to the formation of civilizations that developed in present-day Spain and Portugal. Kittim and Dodanim are linked to the islands and coastal regions of the Mediterranean, contributing to the development of maritime civilizations that dominated trade and navigation in antiquity. These descendants of Japheth not only spread across vast regions, but also laid the foundations for the cultural and ethnic diversity that characterizes Europe. Their journeys and settlements reflect a complex intertwining of cultures, languages, and traditions that formed the tapestry of European history. After the earth was repopulated by Noah's descendants, God made a covenant with Noah and his family, establishing a new order for humanity. This covenant was not just a promise of protection, but also a framework for the new life that would unfold on the renewed earth. God said to Noah and his sons, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." With this blessing, they were given the task of spreading out across the earth and developing new communities. God also established the rainbow as a perpetual sign of this covenant, a visible promise that he would never again destroy all life with a flood. The rainbow served as a constant reminder of God's mercy and faithfulness. Besides this promise, God also gave new guidelines for human life. He affirmed the dignity of human life and instituted justice as a fundamental principle for the new society. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for in the image of God has God made mankind. With this, God emphasized the sanctity of human life and the need to maintain order and justice among people. Noah, in recognition of God's goodness and promises, built an altar and offered sacrifices of gratitude. God, accepting the sacrifice, reaffirmed his covenant with Noah, establishing a new beginning for humanity. Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, followed their own paths, spreading across the earth and forming the roots of future nations. Shem, considered the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, gave rise to lineages that eventually became the civilizations of the Middle East, including the Hebrews, Arameans, and Arabs. Ham is traditionally associated with African peoples and some regions of the Middle East, while Japheth, as mentioned earlier, is seen as the ancestor of European peoples. As time passed, generations multiplied and the earth began to be filled with new communities and cultures. Each group, though distinct in its identity and practices, carried within it the mark of God's covenant with Noah, a promise of life and protection under divine sovereignty. This new post-flood era also brought challenges. As human communities expanded, they faced the realities of survival and coexistence in a vast and often hostile world. The need for leadership, justice, and cooperation became evident, and each group sought ways to organize their societies according to divine principles and practical needs. As generations multiplied and people spread across the earth, new cities and civilizations emerged. One of these cities became especially significant in the biblical narrative: Babel. At that time, humanity spoke a single language and used the same words. United by a common language, they decided to settle on a plain in the land of Shinar. There, driven by ambition and the desire to stand out, the people planned a grand project to build a city with a tower that reached the heavens. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." The Tower of Babel was more than just a physical construction. It symbolized human arrogance and self-sufficiency, an attempt to reach divinity through their own efforts. They wanted a name, an identity, and security that did not depend on God, but on their own strength and achievements. God, observing the work of the people, saw that their unity, based on a common language, gave them immense power to achieve their goals. He said, "They are one people and have one language. This is just the beginning. Soon nothing will be impossible for them." Recognizing the potential destructive power of this unity in rebellion, God decided to intervene to preserve divine order. He came down to confuse the language of the people, making clear communication impossible. With different languages, cooperation broke down, and the construction of the tower stopped. Unable to understand each other, the people scattered across the earth, forming different nations and cultures, each with its own language. This event marked the origin of the world's linguistic and cultural diversity. The Tower of Babel, besides being a lesson on the limits of human ambition, symbolized the fragmentation of humanity into various communities, each with its own paths and stories. Among these scattered communities were the descendants of Japheth, who migrated west and north, settling in regions that would become Europe. The dispersion from Babel not only spread people across the globe, but also spurred the development of different civilizations, each with its own identity, contributing to the rich cultural mosaic of the world. With people scattered after the confusion of languages at Babel, Japheth's descendants began to spread throughout Europe, giving rise to various tribes and nations. Among Japheth's descendants, Gomer played a crucial role in forming European peoples. Gomer had 3 sons: Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. Each of these names is connected to different groups that significantly influenced European history. Ashkenaz is often associated with the Scythians and Germanic peoples. The Scythians, known for being skilled horsemen and nomadic warriors, settled in vast areas that today include parts of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Over time, some of Ashkenaz's descendants migrated west, influencing the formation of the Germanic tribes that later spread throughout Europe. Riphath is a name linked to groups that moved into Central Europe. These people, as they settled, began to develop agricultural communities and laid the foundations for future European civilizations. Their contributions were essential for the development of the cultures and societies that would flourish in the region. Togarmah is associated with regions further east, including parts of Anatolia and adjacent areas. The descendants of Togarmah had a significant impact on the cultures and traditions of these areas, influencing the interactions between the Middle East and Europe. Another son of Japheth, Javan, is particularly important in the history of Mediterranean peoples. Javan is recognized as the ancestor of the Greeks. His sons, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim, spread across the islands and coastal regions of the Mediterranean. The Greeks, descendants of Javan, played a crucial role in shaping Western civilization. With their contributions in philosophy, art, science, and politics, the Greeks established foundations that still influence the modern world. Elisha is often associated with the region of Greece and its islands, while Tarshish is traditionally linked to the Iberian Peninsula, the area that now includes Spain and Portugal. Kittim is associated with the Mediterranean islands, including Cyprus, and Dodanim with the areas around the Aegean Sea. As these descendants of Japheth spread out and formed new communities, they carried with them not just their skills and knowledge, but also the stories and traditions of their origins. The migrations and settlements of these peoples shaped the cultural landscape of Europe, creating a rich and diverse tapestry of cultures, languages, and traditions. The descendants of Gomer and Javan not only contributed to the formation of the first tribes and civilizations in Europe, but they also laid the foundations for future nations. As these tribes grew and interacted, they began to develop distinct identities, each bringing their own unique contribution to the European continent. The descendants of Japheth, as they migrated west and north, established the first European settlements, forming tribes and nations that would shape the continent's history. Among these tribes, the sons of Gomer, especially Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah, began to stand out in their new lands. Ashkenaz and his lineage settled in regions that would later be known as Eastern and Central Europe. They played a crucial role in forming the Germanic tribes, which would be the foundation of many modern European nations. The Germanic people were known for their skills as warriors and craftsmen, and their societies were organized into tribes led by powerful chiefs. Germanic culture, with its rich sagas and mythologies, deeply influenced European identity. Riphath and his descendants moved to areas that today correspond to parts of Central and Western Europe. They developed advanced agricultural practices, building self-sustaining villages and communities. These people formed the basis of future European civilizations, contributing to the development of distinct cultures that would spread throughout Europe. Togarmah and his lineage moved to southeastern Europe and adjacent areas. They influenced regions around Anatolia, interacting with Middle Eastern cultures and bringing important influences to Europe. The interactions between the peoples of Togarmah and other civilizations helped create a cultural bridge between Europe and the East, facilitating the exchange of ideas, technologies, and traditions. The descendants of Javan, in particular, shaped the Mediterranean region. Elisha and his descendants occupied the Greek islands and parts of mainland Greece, where they developed the Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations. These peoples laid the foundations for classical Greek culture, famous for its achievements in philosophy, art, and science. Tarshish and his descendants migrated to the Iberian Peninsula, where they founded settlements that eventually became the precursors of the Iberian civilizations. Kittim and Dodanim settled on the Mediterranean islands, including Cyprus and the areas around the Aegean Sea. These areas became centers of trade and cultural exchange, connecting Europe with other parts of the ancient world. The migrations of these descendants of Japheth were not just physical movements, but also cultural and social journeys. They brought with them their traditions, languages, and knowledge, influencing the regions where they settled and being influenced by them in return. This dynamic interaction between different peoples and cultures helped shape Europe into a diverse and vibrant continent. As Japheth's descendants settled and prospered, their tribes became more complex and organized. Interactions between different groups, often through trade and war, led to the formation of alliances and conflicts that would define European history. Through these interactions, the foundations of future nations began to form, each bringing its own unique contribution to the cultural tapestry of Europe. The descendants of Japheth settled in Europe continued to grow and develop, forming tribes and nations that spread across vast regions. Among these tribes, the sons of Gomer stand out, particularly Ashkenaz, whose lineage is associated with the Scythians and the early Germanic peoples. Ashkenaz, considered an ancestor of the Scythians, saw his descendants settle in the steppes of Eastern Europe. The Scythians were known for their horseback riding skills and being formidable warriors. They created a strong nomadic culture, constantly moving across the vast plains, establishing trade routes, and influencing the regions they passed through. The Scythian influence spread over large areas, leading to advances in metallurgy, arts, and trade. As the descendants of Ashkenaz migrated west, some settled in the forests and valleys of Central Europe, giving rise to the Germanic tribes. These tribes were distinguished by their tribal organization, their warfare skills, and their rich oral traditions. Germanic mythology, with its gods and heroes, reflects the depth and complexity of their beliefs and values. The Germanic people also introduced new agricultural and artisanal practices that shaped life in Europe. The descendants of Rifath settled further west and north, influencing the formation of the Celtic tribes. The Celts, known for their intricate art and skills as blacksmiths, spread across much of Western Europe and the British Isles. They developed a society based on clans with a strong oral tradition and rich mythology. Celtic art, with its complex patterns and deep symbolism, became one of the most enduring cultural legacies of ancient Europe. Togarma, another son of Gomer, saw his descendants move to southeastern Europe and Anatolia. These people established important connections with Middle Eastern cultures, facilitating the exchange of ideas and technologies. The influence of Togarma's descendants helped create a cultural bridge between Europe and the East, contributing to the cultural and technological richness of emerging civilizations. The sons of Javan, in particular, contributed significantly to the development of Mediterranean civilizations. Elisha and his descendants founded the first Greek cities and cultures, including the Minoan civilization in Crete and the Mycenaean civilization on the Greek mainland. These people laid the foundations for classical Greek civilization, which would be known for its contributions to philosophy, art, science, and politics. The Greeks developed an advanced society with independent city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Corinth, each with its own forms of government and culture. Greek philosophy, with figures like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, explored fundamental questions about existence, ethics, and knowledge, profoundly influencing Western thought. Tarshish and his descendants migrated to the Iberian Peninsula, where they founded settlements that became the precursors to the Iberian civilizations. These people established trade routes and developed a rich and diverse culture, influencing the formation of future nations like Spain and Portugal. Kitim and Dodonum settled on the Mediterranean islands, including Cyprus and the regions around the Aegean Sea. These settlements became centers of trade and cultural exchange, connecting Europe with other parts of the ancient world. The influence of these people helped create a network of trade and communication that facilitated the growth of European civilizations. As the tribes descended from Japheth spread across Europe, new groups emerged and began to leave deep marks on the continent's history. Among these groups, the Scythian tribes and the civilizations that arose from them played crucial roles. The Scythians, descendants of Ashkenaz, continued to expand their territory and influence. Known for their horseback riding skills and military prowess, the Scythians became masters of the vast Eurasian steppes. They not only dominated these regions, but also established trade routes connecting Europe with Asia. These routes facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures, contributing to the development of European civilizations. The Scythians were organized into clans and tribes, each with its own leader. They practiced a distinct form of art, characterized by intricate and ornate metalwork. These artifacts reveal much about the life and beliefs of the Scythians, showing a culture rich in symbolism and craftsmanship. As the Scythians spread, other groups descended from Gomer also began to emerge. Among them, the Celts, who settled in Western Europe, are especially notable. The Celts spread across vast areas, including France, the British Isles, the Iberian Peninsula, and parts of Central Europe. They created a society based on clans, with a rich oral tradition and a strong cultural identity. Celtic society was organized into tribes, each governed by a chief and a council of elders. The Druids, the Celtic priestly class, played a central role in society, serving as advisors, judges, and keepers of knowledge. Celtic religion was deeply rooted in nature, with many gods and spirits associated with rivers, forests, and mountains. Celtic art, known for its intricate and complex designs, became one of the most enduring legacies of ancient Europe. The interwoven patterns and symbols used in Celtic art reflected a worldview where everything in nature was connected. This art was expressed in various forms, including jewelry, weapons, and stone monuments. While the Celts spread throughout Western Europe, the descendants of Javan were shaping culture and civilization in the Mediterranean. Greece, with its flourishing city-states, became a center of innovation and culture. The Greeks introduced significant advances in areas such as philosophy, science, architecture, and politics. The Greeks developed the idea of democracy, especially in Athens, where citizens had the right to participate directly in political decision-making. This political innovation not only influenced Europe, but also became an inspiration for future forms of government around the world. The Greeks also made notable advances in philosophy, with thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle exploring fundamental questions about existence, ethics, and knowledge. Their ideas laid the foundations for many of the academic disciplines we know today. Meanwhile, the descendants of Tarshish in the Iberian Peninsula were establishing settlements that would flourish into rich cultures. They engaged in trade with other parts of Europe and the Mediterranean, establishing trade routes that contributed to the region's prosperity. The people of Kittim and Dodanim, settled on the Mediterranean islands, became skilled sailors and traders. Their islands became centers of cultural and commercial exchange, connecting Europe with Africa and Asia. This maritime trade helped spread ideas, technologies, and cultures, further enriching the cultural tapestry of Europe. As Europe continued to develop, the influence of Japheth's descendants, especially the Scythians and Celts, began to expand even more. However, another group of Japheth's descendants, the Magogites, also played a crucial role in shaping European civilizations. The Magogites, descendants of Magog, son of Japheth, settled north and east of the lands inhabited by the Scythians. They were known for their war skills and nomadic culture, similar to the Scythians. The Magogites actively participated in the trade routes linking Europe to Asia, contributing to the exchange of goods and ideas between the continents. As the Magogites spread, they influenced the Slavic tribes that would eventually populate much of Eastern Europe. The Slavic tribes, with their rich oral traditions and strong connection to the land, began forming societies that would evolve into the future nations of Russia, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and other Eastern European countries. These Slavic tribes developed a vibrant culture with a rich tradition of music, dance, and craftsmanship. Their stories and myths, passed down through generations, reflected the beauty and challenges of the lands they inhabited. The Slavs would become an important force in European history, contributing significantly to the continent's cultural and linguistic diversity. While the Magogites and their descendants influenced Eastern Europe, the Germanic and Celtic tribes continued to shape the west and north of the continent. The Germanics, with their military skills and tribal organization, began forming confederations that would become the foundations of future nations like Germany, France, and England. Their raids and migrations, often resulting in conflicts with the Roman Empire, played a crucial role in transforming ancient Europe. The Celts, meanwhile, continued spreading their culture throughout Western Europe and the British Isles. Although they faced challenges and invasions from other groups, their culture persisted, leaving a lasting legacy in art, music, and traditions. Celtic influence can still be seen in many parts of Europe today, especially in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Brittany, where the Celtic language and traditions are still preserved. The descendants of Javan, especially the Greeks, were laying the foundations of Western civilization in the Mediterranean. Classical Greece, with its achievements in philosophy, science, art, and politics, was flourishing. Greek city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Corinth became centers of culture and innovation. Greek philosophy, with figures like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, explored fundamental questions about existence, ethics, and knowledge. Their ideas not only influenced Western thought, but also shaped how we see the world today. The Greeks also made significant advances in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, contributing to scientific progress. Greek art and architecture, with their majestic temples and detailed sculptures, set standards of beauty and proportion that are still admired. The Parthenon, dedicated to the goddess Athena, is an iconic example of Greek architectural style that combines functionality with aesthetics. In the West, the descendants of Tarshish in the Iberian Peninsula were developing their own rich and diverse cultures. They established trade routes with other parts of Europe and the Mediterranean, contributing to the region's prosperity. The Iberian civilizations, influenced by the Celts, Phoenicians, and Greeks, created a unique culture that would eventually give rise to the nations of Spain and Portugal. Meanwhile, the Mediterranean islands, inhabited by the descendants of Kittim and Dodanim, became centers of trade and cultural exchange. These islands, including Cyprus and the regions around the Aegean Sea, played a crucial role in spreading ideas and technologies between Europe, Africa, and Asia. As various tribes and cultures flourished in Europe, the contributions of Japheth's descendants began to consolidate into a shared Indo-European culture, marked by advances in language, technology, and society. The Indo-European language, originating from these ancient tribes, began to spread across the continent. This proto-language fragmented into the various languages we know today, such as Latin, Greek, Germanic, Celtic, and Slavic languages. This linguistic diversity is one of the most enduring legacies of these ancient tribes, influencing communication and literature throughout Europe. Technological advances also marked this era. Metallurgy, developed by the Scythians and other Indo-European peoples, brought innovations in tools, weapons, and decorative artifacts. The skill in working with iron and bronze allowed these cultures to create more effective weaponry and more efficient agricultural tools, boosting economic and military development. Meanwhile, in Greece, civilization was flourishing. The Greek city-states like Athens and Sparta were at the height of their power. Athens, in particular, became a beacon of democracy, philosophy, and the arts. The Athenian democratic system, where citizens participated directly in political decisions, was revolutionary and influenced many future societies. The Olympic Games, started in Greece, exemplified the competitive spirit and celebration of physical excellence. These games united the Greek city-states and established a tradition of athletic celebration that still endures today. The Greeks also made remarkable advances in architecture. The Parthenon and other Athenian temples are testaments to the Greek pursuit of aesthetic perfection and functionality. These buildings were not just places of worship, but also symbols of Greek power and culture. The Slavs, influenced by the Magogites, began to expand and form the first complex societies in Eastern Europe. They established villages and cities, developing a rich agrarian and artisanal culture. The Slavs built fortresses and trade centers that became important points of economic and cultural exchange. Meanwhile, the Romans, descendants of other Indo-European groups, were beginning to emerge as a dominant force on the Italian peninsula. Influenced by the Etruscans and the Greeks, the Romans adopted many of their cultural and technological innovations, integrating them into their own growing society. The rise of Rome marked the beginning of a new era in European history. With their military prowess, political organization, and advanced infrastructure, Rome began to conquer and unify vast regions of Europe. The construction of roads, aqueducts, and cities strengthened the cohesion of the empire, facilitating trade and communication between different parts of the continent. Latin, the language of the Romans, spread throughout Western Europe, becoming the basis for the Romance languages, such as Spanish, French, and Italian. Roman culture, with its emphasis on law, engineering, and governance, deeply influenced European societies. The interactions between the Romans and other European tribes, such as the Celts and the Germanics, were often marked by conflict, but also by significant cultural exchanges. The Romanization of conquered tribes brought new levels of organization and development, while local cultures influenced the Romans. As Rome consolidated its power, the descendants of Japheth continued to contribute to Europe's rich cultural tapestry. Innovations in technology, language, and society resulted from a complex exchange of ideas and practices among different peoples. This process of interaction and integration was crucial to the development of European civilization. The Indo-European culture, with its diverse expressions, laid the foundations for Europe's future. The mix of local traditions and external influences created a unique dynamic that shaped the continent's identity. The rise of Rome and the persistence of local traditions set the stage for medieval Europe and, eventually, the cultural and scientific renaissance that would transform the world. With the rise of Rome, European civilization entered a new era of progress and transformation. The Roman Empire became the dominant force in Europe, influencing every aspect of life, from governance to culture and technology. Ancient Rome was not just a city, but a vast empire that stretched from Britain to the Middle East and North Africa. Roman expansion was driven by a combination of military power, shrewd diplomacy, and advanced infrastructure. The highly trained and disciplined Roman legions conquered vast territories, while Roman roads, aqueducts, and bridges connected these lands, facilitating trade, communication, and mobility. The Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that lasted about 2 centuries, allowed for unprecedented cultural and economic flourishing. Under Roman rule, European cities grew and prospered. Rome, the capital of the empire, became a cosmopolitan metropolis, housing people from all parts of the known world. During this time, Roman culture absorbed and adapted many influences from the cultures it conquered, especially Greek. Roman architecture, inspired by the Greeks, evolved to include innovations like the arch and concrete, allowing for the construction of impressive structures such as the Colosseum, aqueducts, and roads. Roman cities were planned with forums, amphitheaters, public baths, and temples, creating vibrant centers of public life. Roman literature and philosophy also flourished. Writers like Virgil, Ovid, and Horace produced works that are still studied and admired today. Stoic philosophy, popular among many Romans, emphasized virtue, reason, and self-control, deeply influencing Roman thought and later Christianity. Latin, the language of the Romans, became the lingua franca of the empire, facilitating administration and communication. Vulgar Latin, spoken by the common people, eventually evolved into the Romance languages, such as Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian, leaving a lasting linguistic legacy. As Rome expanded, it also faced internal and external challenges. The Germanic, Celtic, and other tribes to the north and east of the empire frequently clashed with the Romans, leading to a series of battles and invasions that tested the empire's resilience. However, these interactions also led to significant cultural exchanges. Many Germanic tribes adopted aspects of Roman culture, while the Romans were influenced by the traditions and practices of the peoples they encountered. One of the most significant events during the height of Rome was the introduction of Christianity. Originating in the Roman province of Judea, Christianity quickly spread throughout the empire. Initially, Christians were persecuted, but eventually, under Emperor Constantine, Christianity was legalized and later became the official religion of the empire. This transformation had a profound impact on European culture, shaping its religious practices, values, and art. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marked the end of an era, but not the end of Roman influence. Roman institutions, culture, and infrastructure continued to influence Europe during the Middle Ages and beyond. The collapse of the empire led to political fragmentation and the rise of Germanic kingdoms that, though initially seen as barbaric, gradually adopted and adapted Roman traditions. The Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Franks, and other Germanic peoples established kingdoms in former Roman provinces, blending their own traditions with those of the Romans. The kingdom of the Franks, under the leadership of Clovis and his successors, eventually became one of the most powerful in Western Europe, giving rise to the Carolingian Empire under Charlemagne. Rome's influence, therefore, continued to shape Europe in various ways. Roman law served as the foundation for many European legal systems. Roman architecture and engineering inspired medieval and Renaissance buildings. The Roman Catholic Church, which emerged as one of Europe's most powerful institutions, maintained the Latin language and many Roman traditions. With the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, Europe entered the era we know as the Middle Ages. Although the empire had fallen, its influences continued to shape the continent in various ways. Europe became a mosaic of kingdoms and principalities ruled by barbarian leaders who, over time, adopted and adapted many aspects of Roman culture. Among these kingdoms, the kingdom of the Franks emerged as one of the most powerful. Under the leadership of Clovis, the Franks unified much of Gaul and converted to Christianity. This conversion not only solidified the Franks' alliance with the Catholic Church, but also established Christianity as the dominant religion in Western Europe. Charlemagne, the grandson of Clovis, expanded the Frankish kingdom even further, creating the vast Carolingian Empire. Crowned emperor by the Pope in 800 AD, Charlemagne sought to revive the glory of the Roman Empire. He promoted education, art, and culture, establishing schools and inviting scholars from all over Europe to his court in Aachen. This cultural revival, known as the Carolingian Renaissance, helped preserve many ancient texts and promoted the development of writing and scholarship. The administration of the Carolingian Empire was organized to ensure the cohesion of its vast lands. Charlemagne divided the empire into counties and margraviates, governed by counts and margraves who were responsible for maintaining order and justice in their regions. He also introduced the Missi Dominici, special envoys of the emperor who supervised local rulers. ensuring loyalty and administrative efficiency. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church solidified itself as the most powerful institution in Europe. Monasteries became centers of learning and manuscript preservation, while bishops and archbishops wielded great political and spiritual influence. Monasticism, especially under the rule of Saint Benedict, flourished, with monasteries spreading across the continent, serving as centers of teaching, charity, and spirituality. During the Middle Ages, the Viking, Magyar, and Saracen invasions posed constant challenges for European kingdoms. The Vikings, coming from Scandinavia, were known for their swift and devastating raids, but also for their skills as traders and settlers. They established settlements in England, Ireland, France, and even Russia, where they mixed with local populations, influencing the cultures and politics of Europe. The Magyar invasions, coming from the Eurasian steppe, brought new challenges to the kingdoms of Central Europe. Eventually, the Magyars settled in the Carpathian Basin, where they founded the Kingdom of Hungary. This kingdom, over time, became an important stronghold of Christianity in Central Europe, defending the borders against new incursions. The Saracens, or Muslims, brought war and trade to the Western Mediterranean. The Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula resulted in the creation of Al-Andalus, a caliphate that became a center of culture, science, and religious tolerance, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together and contributed to a remarkable cultural flourishing. However, political fragmentation and constant external threats led to the development of the feudal system. Under feudalism, land was the main source of wealth and power. Feudal lords owned vast tracts of land, which were worked by peasants in exchange for protection and sustenance. The feudal hierarchy, with kings, nobles, and knights, structured medieval society, creating bonds of loyalty and obligation that maintained order in times of uncertainty. The feudal system not only organized society, but also influenced the culture and economy of Europe. Castles, which served as both fortifications and lordly residences, became symbols of feudal power. Life in castles was marked by a code of conduct and chivalry, which exalted honor, courage, and loyalty. Over the centuries, medieval Europe witnessed a series of transformations. The Crusades, starting in the late 11th century, sought to reclaim Jerusalem and other holy lands from Muslim control. These military expeditions had profound impacts on Europe, promoting contact with the East, enriching trade, and introducing new ideas and technologies. The Middle Ages were also a period of urban growth. Cities like Venice, Genoa, and Bruges became prosperous centers of trade and culture. Merchant and craft guilds played a crucial role in economic development, regulating production and trade, and promoting quality and innovation. Universities began to emerge in Europe, with institutions like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford becoming centers of learning and intellectual debate. Scholasticism, a method of study that sought to reconcile faith with reason, flourished in these universities, paving the way for the Renaissance. As the Middle Ages progressed, Europe underwent profound transformations that shaped Western civilization. The transition to the late Middle Ages was marked by a series of events and movements that paved the way for the modern era. One of the most significant developments was the rise of city-states and urban revival. As trade flourished, especially after the Crusades, cities like Venice, Genoa, and Florence became centers of wealth and culture. These city-states were governed by powerful merchant families, such as the Medici in Florence, who sponsored the arts and sciences, creating a fertile environment for innovation and creativity. Urban life brought with it a new class of citizens, the bourgeoisie, or townspeople, who were merchants, artisans, and bankers. This new social group began to challenge the established feudal order, seeking greater freedom and influence. Guilds, associations of craftsmen and merchants, played a crucial role in economic development, regulating product quality and protecting the interests of their members. The emergence of universities was also a significant milestone in this era. Institutions like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford became centers of learning and intellectual debate. Medieval scholars, known as scholastics, sought to harmonize classical philosophy, especially that of Aristotle, with Christian theology. Figures like Thomas Aquinas were instrumental in this effort, producing works that are still studied today. While education and trade flourished, the Catholic Church continued to exert significant influence on European life. However, the Church also faced challenges and criticisms. Heretical movements arose, questioning the authority and practices of the Church. In response, the Church initiated internal reforms and intensified the Inquisition to combat heresy. The Black Death, which swept through Europe in the 14th century, was another crucial event. The pandemic decimated a third of the European population, causing enormous suffering and social changes. The resulting labor shortage led to a greater appreciation of the surviving workers, further weakening the feudal system and contributing to the emergence of a more wage-based economy. Amid this turmoil, signs of a cultural and intellectual revival began to emerge. The Renaissance, which started in Italy in the 14th century, was a movement that sought to rediscover and revive the classical culture of Greece and Rome. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael created masterpieces that redefined Western art, while thinkers like Petrarch and Machiavelli explored new ideas about humanity and government. The Renaissance was also a time of scientific advancements. Nicholas Copernicus proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, challenging the traditional geocentric view. Johannes Gutenberg, with his invention of the movable type printing press, revolutionized book production, making knowledge more accessible and encouraging the spread of new ideas. Another important milestone was the Protestant Reformation. In 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg, criticizing the practices of the Catholic Church and sparking a movement that would lead to the formation of various Protestant denominations. The Reformation not only divided Western Christianity, but also encouraged a new emphasis on personal scripture reading and individual responsibility before God. As Europe transformed, new powers emerged. On the Iberian Peninsula, the kingdoms of Portugal and Spain began exploring the Atlantic, ushering in the Age of Discovery. Explorers like Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Ferdinand Magellan expanded European horizons, establishing trade routes and colonies in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. These explorations not only enriched European nations, but also initiated a process of globalization that would forever alter the course of world history. The new geographical discoveries brought a new era of cultural and economic exchange. Products like gold, silver, spices, and new foods like corn, potatoes, and tomatoes transformed the European economy and diet. At the same time, contact with new cultures and civilizations broadened Europe's intellectual and artistic horizons. The transformation of Europe during the late Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern era was profound and multifaceted. Cities grew and prospered, trade flourished, education and science advanced, and new religious and political ideas began to take shape. These developments laid the foundations for modern Europe, shaping a continent that would continue to play a central role in world history. The end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern era represent a period of great dynamism and change. The Roman heritage, combined with medieval and Renaissance innovations, created a rich and diverse civilization. Europe was now ready to enter a new phase of its history, marked by discoveries, innovations, and an increasing role on the global stage. As Europe entered the modern era, a combination of economic, cultural, and political factors transformed the continent. The Age of Discovery not only expanded the geographical horizons of Europeans, but also brought profound social and economic changes within Europe. The colonial empires of Portugal and Spain, followed by others like England, France, and the Netherlands, began to flourish. The exploration and colonization of the Americas, Africa, and Asia brought immense wealth to Europe, fueling economic growth and the expansion of cities. The trade of spices, gold, silver, and other valuable goods created a new class of merchants and bankers who played a crucial role in shaping modern capitalism. The scientific revolution, which unfolded during the 16th and 17th centuries, represented a radical transformation in how Europeans understood the world. Thinkers like Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, and Newton challenged traditional conceptions of the universe, introducing a new method of investigation based on observation, experimentation, and logical reasoning. Modern science, with its discoveries and innovations, began to take shape, profoundly altering human perception of nature and the cosmos. At the same time, Europe underwent significant cultural transformations. The Renaissance, which had begun in Italy, spread across the continent, influencing art, literature, and philosophy. Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press allowed the rapid dissemination of ideas and knowledge, facilitating communication and intellectual exchange. Works by authors like Shakespeare, Cervantes, and Montaigne captured the complexity of the human condition and established new forms of literary expression. The Protestant Reformation and the subsequent Counter-Reformation also had a profound impact on Europe. The religious division brought conflicts, but also encouraged diversity of thought and religious practices. Protestants emphasized individual Bible reading and personal responsibility before God, while the Catholic Church, in response, initiated a series of internal reforms to combat corruption and revitalize faith. These religious movements reshaped the spiritual landscape of Europe, influencing politics, education, and culture. The political changes during this period were also significant. Centralized monarchies began to emerge in many European countries, replacing fragmented feudal structures. Kings like Louis XIV of France exemplified absolute power, centralizing the government and promoting the idea that the king was the divine representative on earth. This monarchical absolutism led to the formation of more cohesive and powerful nation-states. At the same time, ideas about governance and individual rights began to evolve. The Enlightenment, an 18th century intellectual movement, promoted reason, science, and the pursuit of human progress. Philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu criticized traditional institutions and advocated for liberty, equality, and justice. These ideas sparked debates about the nature of government and citizens' rights, setting the stage for future political revolutions. The Industrial Revolution, which began in England in the late 18th century, brought another wave of profound changes. The introduction of machines and mass production technologies transformed the European economy and society. Factories emerged, cities grew, and rural life gave way to increasing urbanization. Manual labor was replaced by mechanized processes, boosting productivity, but also bringing new social challenges, such as factory working conditions and growing economic inequality. Industrialization also spurred advances in transportation and communication. The invention of the steam engine and the development of railways and steamships made it easier to move people and goods, connecting different parts of Europe and the world more closely. The telegraph allowed rapid communication over long distances, transforming how information was shared. These economic and technological transformations led to significant political and social changes. Labor and social movements began to emerge, demanding better working conditions, labor rights, and social reforms. The idea of human rights and democracy gained momentum, influencing politics and legislation in many European countries. The Age of Revolutions, which included the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the independence movements in Latin America, was a period of dramatic change. The French Revolution, in particular, had a profound impact on Europe, overthrowing the absolute monarchy and establishing a republic based on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Revolutionary ideas spread, inspiring similar movements and political changes across the continent. As Europe moved into the 19th century, it was entering a new era of globalization and modernity. Scientific innovations, social and political changes, and economic growth created a dynamic and constantly evolving environment. The heritage of ancient civilizations, combined with modern-era innovations, prepared Europe to become a center of global influence, shaping the course of world history in the centuries to come. The transformations of the modern era not only redefined Europe, but also had global repercussions. European colonialism, driven by the quest for resources and markets, expanded European influence around the world, with lasting consequences for many regions. Europe became a continent of contrasts, with great advances in science and technology, but also facing challenges such as wars, inequality, and social tensions. This era of change set the stage for the 20th century, a period of major conflicts and revolutions, but also of progress and innovation. Europe, with its rich history and culture, continued to play a central role in world history, adapting and evolving in response to the challenges and opportunities of a rapidly changing world. As Europe entered the 20th century, it found itself at a crucial turning point. The continent, which had been a center of innovation and progress, also became the stage for some of the most devastating conflicts in human history. The political, economic, and social tensions that had accumulated over the centuries culminated in events that would deeply shape the future of Europe and the world. World War I, 1914 to 1918, was a devastating conflict that involved the major European powers and resulted in unprecedented destruction. The war drastically altered the political map of Europe, leading to the collapse of empires such as the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended the conflict, imposed harsh conditions on Germany, planting the seeds for future tensions. The war left Europe in ruins, with devastated economies and traumatized societies. However, it also triggered significant social changes, including the advancement of women's rights, as women had played crucial roles in the economy during the conflict. Ideas of self-determination and democracy gained strength, influencing independence movements in European colonies around the world. The 1920s, known as the Roaring Twenties, was a period of economic recovery and cultural flourishing. However, this prosperity was interrupted by the Great Depression of 1929, which brought economic misery and political instability to many European countries. The global economic crisis exacerbated social and political tensions, creating fertile ground for extremist ideologies. The rise of fascism and Nazism in Italy and Germany, respectively, marked a new era of authoritarianism and aggression. Adolf Hitler, leader of the Nazi Party, rose to power in Germany, promising to restore the country's glory and reverse the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler's expansionist and racist policies led to the beginning of World War II in 1939. World War II, 1939 to 1945, was even more devastating than the first, resulting in enormous human losses and material destruction. The war brought unimaginable horrors, including the Holocaust, in which millions of Jews, Roma, disabled individuals, homosexuals, and other minorities were systematically exterminated by the Nazis. The war ended with the defeat of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the rise of the United States and the Soviet Union as global superpowers. After the war, Europe was in ruins. The Marshall Plan, an economic aid program from the United States, was crucial for European reconstruction. Western Europe, in particular, experienced a rapid and robust economic recovery. The Cold War, an era of tension between the US-led and Soviet-led blocs, divided Europe into two spheres of influence: capitalist Western Europe and communist Eastern Europe. The creation of the United Nations, UN, in 1945 was an effort to promote peace and international cooperation, preventing a repeat of the horrors of the world wars. The formation of the European Economic Community, EEC, in 1957, which later became the European Union, EU, was an important step in European integration, promoting economic and political cooperation among the continent's nations. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe and marked the end of the Cold War. The reunification of Germany and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 paved the way for a new era of European cooperation and integration. The European Union expanded to include many countries from the former Soviet sphere, promoting stability and prosperity in the region. Entering the 21st century brought new challenges and opportunities for Europe. The global financial crisis of 2008 had deep impacts, leading to economic austerity and social tensions in various countries. Mass migration, driven by conflicts in the Middle East and Africa, challenged Europe's social and political cohesion, testing the limits of solidarity and integration. Europe also faced the challenge of Brexit, with the United Kingdom voting in 2016 to leave the European Union. This event had significant implications for the cohesion and future of the European project. However, the EU continued to work on strengthening its integration and addressing global challenges such as climate change, security, and technological innovation. The COVID-19 pandemic, which began in 2019, was a significant test for Europe's resilience. The coordinated response by the EU, with economic recovery packages and joint vaccination efforts, highlighted the importance of solidarity and international cooperation. Today, Europe remains a continent of great diversity and dynamism. The heritage of ancient civilizations, combined with modern innovations and challenges, makes Europe a center of culture, science, and progress. The history of Europe, from ancient Indo-European tribes to today's complex nation-states, is a narrative of adaptation, resilience, and continuous evolution. And so we conclude our journey through the fascinating history of the origins of Europeans, from the earliest Indo-European tribes to the complex and vibrant modern Europe. Each stage, each transformation has shaped the continent in unique and profound ways, creating the rich cultural, social, and political tapestry we know today. If you enjoyed this dive into European history, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more amazing content on history and culture. Like the video to help us reach more people interested in learning and sharing knowledge. And of course, leave your comment below telling us what impressed you the most or what aspect of European history you would like to see in future videos. Your participation is essential for us to keep producing quality content. So, subscribe, like, and comment. Let's explore and celebrate the rich heritage of our history together. See you next time.